Welcome. So in this video, we are going to break down the world of investment banking. And we're going to do this from the perspective of the seller. I'm going to talk about the biggest dangers for founders selling their business, using an investment banker, and more than likely selling their business to a private equity firm. This is something that's going on in the world of finance, and it's not something people are hearing much about, because the people that this happens to are effectively legally gagged from discussing it. So that's why we might not hear about it from the confessions of the victims. But in this video, I'm going to talk about exactly what's going on when a founder goes to sell their business, and how you can actually protect yourself from being one of these victims. So we're going to use a dummy business. We're going to use John's business, Atlas Heavy. And let's imagine the founder has worked in this business for 20 years and he wants to sell the business. So naturally, he needs an investment banker to do that. What is an investment banker? Well, an investment banker is really just a real estate agent who can read a P&L statement. They are the ones who want to sell the business, take a commission, of course. But most importantly, the reason they're in such a strong position is the founder of the business, for the first time, feels like they have someone who has an alignment, because the investment banker is going to pitch the sale price to the founder and say something like, look, I can get you, $60 million for your business. So we're going to try to get you the best price. So you'd naturally think, well, if I'm a seller, what is wrong with that? There can't be anything wrong with that. I just want to wipe my hands off it, sell the business and move on. This is where the trap is. This is exactly where the trap is. Because it looks like a shared goal. We simply want to get the best price. I'm going to pitch your business to a big private equity firm and get you a big exit. The reason it's not a shared goal is because the liability is not shared. The liability is always 100% on John, the owner of the business. And you must never forget that, because that is where the problems lie. So they use the owner's ego against them. Look, John, you've worked 20 years in this construction business. You've worked your whole life. We want to get you the best price. We want to get you the best price possible. So let's get this deal done. Yeah, let's get the deal done. And remember, this is the first time the founder has ever sold a business. The investment banker has done this, 12 times this year. They're highly experienced. So automatically the founder is at a disadvantage. Massive disadvantage. And they're going to get dragged through this long, stressful process at a disadvantage. You can never, as a founder, you can never go into this alone. You need an out. You need a third party with no interest in it, with no financial interest in the deal. The investment banker gets paid off the gross price of the valuation of the deal. So normally, what's happening is they are looking at the EBITDA, saying, can get you maybe 4 times this, 5 times this number here. Okay, so let's look at the P&L statement. So the P&L statement looks like a very strong and healthy business. Net margin is 16%. The net profit's 8 million. So what's wrong with this? This is a P&L statement. It looks great. Everything's fine. But as I made in my last video, where I said it's actually more important to look at the cash return on invested capital. See, the apex operators already know this, but we're going to break it down in this video. I'm going to break down the reality of it. The reality is, let's look at the physical reality. It doesn't include the maintenance capex. Yeah, maintenance capex. So the actual true free cash flow of the business could be $1 million. Yeah. Because we're using this as an example. Let's look at a heavy construction business where these machines might need replaced every 7 to 10 years. Okay, so this is important. Every business has some form of maintenance capex. But what the investment banker subtly does is try and add back maintenance capex and disguise it as growth capex. So what do I mean? So what they might say is, okay, there's a transaction here on your bank statement. The accountants are asking, yeah, they're doing a quality of earnings report, and they say to the owner, look, there's a bank transaction here. It says 350k or 500k, $1 million. You bought something from Caterpillar. What was that? And the founder's like, well, we bought an excavator. The last one died. So we need to buy a new one. So investment banker might say something like, we want to get you the best price possible, so we could potentially say that was a business expansion. You were expanding. And John's thinking, well, I mean, you could say that the newer model is slightly better than the old model, so that's an upgrade, yeah? That sort of counts as an upgrade, no? So what's happening there is the investment banker is actually, throwing things out there. They have no liability. So, well, we could just say that was growth, so we can add it back. The founder doesn't know that they're committing fraud. They don't know this. They don't probably know the difference between maintenance capex and growth capex and add backs. They just trust their accountant. Their job is to run the business. He's busy on a construction site, dealing with all his staff and his problems, and he's not thinking like that. So it takes 100% liability though. Now, obviously, this figure is I've slightly exaggerated the figure. $10 million. Okay, they don't pay $10 million every single year to fix plant and machinery. Yeah, it doesn't cost $10 million. You don't need to pay these machines every single year, because capital expenditure doesn't happen on a linear basis. It's not like physics decides to operate on our schedule. The point is, the machines don't last forever. And what could happen is, for 3 to 4 years, there's absolutely no money getting spent on replacing the machinery. So the free cash flow looks a lot higher. Ideally, those are the years that the investment banker wants to pitch. Remember, the valuation is based on what the business actually did. It's based on what the banker can convince the buyer the business could do if they stop spending money. Also consider this. When John's thinking about selling the business, he's not going to be planning on growth. He's not going to be buying lots of new equipment and doing big expansions if he's coming up to an exit. He purposely is going to spend less on maintenance to inflate the valuation, obviously. And that directly ties in with the investment banker. So this is what's important to understand. The machines don't need replaced every single year, but what can happen is the bill is still due anyway. It doesn't change the fact that the bill is due. Maintenance capex needs to be accounted for. That's why we base it on a cash flow reality. Yeah. So why should this bother John? Why does he care? He just wants to take the money and dip, right? This is it. And this is the biggest thing that the sellers look at. They say, well, why should I care about any of this? I just want the money. I want the best price. It's the next guy's problem. Yeah? Sold as is. If you were selling like a used car on the internet, that would apply. Yeah? Sold as seen. This does not apply to the world of acquisitions and massive purchases of businesses. That does not apply. The rules do not apply. You see, another factor to consider as well is John is now going through absolute stress of dealing with accountants, dealing with lawyers. He's taking his eye off the ball as well, and that could actually affect the actual business performance, which could then also reduce the valuation, and he ends up accepting a lower valuation of the business anyway because he just wants the pain to stop. He just wants the pain to finish because he's been going through this for years, trying to get this sale through. Business is not performing as well. And then the investment banker already knew from day one the business wasn't worth what he pitched. But John wouldn't have accepted the deal, wouldn't have accepted the investment banker as his broker unless he said, I can get you 60 million for the deal. So that's another part to consider. But most importantly, what we need to understand is the most dangerous thing to John actually is an over-leveraged buyer. A private equity firm buying the business doesn't use their own money. They obviously use debt. Of course they use debt. And they'll convince John to do a seller note. So vendor financing the deal, which is dangerous as well, because what really happens on the day of the sale, so he sold it for $60 million, but the actual cash that hits his bank account is 29. After the investment banker takes their fee, after he pays capital gains tax, the money is also put into escrow, and then the seller note that John's actually funding the deal. Now, the problem here is, remember, John's taking 100% liability. So let's imagine in 2 years later, he's sitting on a beach or he's on a golf course thinking he's won life, he's achieved, and the business, all the machines that were running, put together with duct tape, right? They're put together with duct tape because he's just kept that free cash flow looking as high as possible. The business cannot, the buyer, the private equity firm, now cannot afford, the business cannot afford the debt. This is the problem here. Because imagine the cost of the debt is now $3.9 million because it's over leveraged, it's overpaid for the asset. This is the danger. This is the danger. Selling the business for so much and the buyer's over leveraged comes back to bite the founder. Look at this. Look at all the debt the private equity firm's taking on to buy this. Say they've got a sponsor, yeah? Let's imagine, Harvard University's give them sponsorship, the banks paid towards it, and then, of course, John's funding the deal as well. So the debt to service is 3.9 million. Everything looks fine in year one, but year two hits, and all these machines need replaced, and the bill is more than the free cash flow of the business, and the business is now in a serious problem, could go bankrupt. So John thinks, you know what, it's not my problem. But the private equity firm and the investment banker and everyone is saying, okay, what do we do here? Well, who has the money? John just walked out the door with $29 million. Let's go after John. Yeah. See, he's the number one target, because if there's something goes wrong here and the business has not been correctly valued, guess what happens? They come after him for fraudulent misrepresentation and breach of contract. Yeah, because who lied on the quality of earnings report? Yeah, when they looked at the bank statement, it said, was this excavator? Was this replacing the old one that died, or was it buying one to grow the business? So it shouldn't have been added back on. The investment banker, who wants the valuation to be as high as possible, so does the business owner, John. So they have a shared goal, but not shared liability. This is why you must never lie on the quality of earnings, because now the founder is liable. Now they're going to come back. They're going to come after John. You see? you think, well, surely this doesn't happen. It absolutely happens. S&P Global have written articles on it. We've also got the Federal Reserve of New York have wrote about this. This is a massive issue in the private equity world. Now, you also might ask, well, surely the private equity firm that's buying the business knows this. So they know this. This is overinflated. Yes, they do know that. But they are also protected from the liability. All the liability is on John. They know it's probably overvalued. They don't care. They probably just want to buy it and sell it to the next private equity firm. Because we've put all the liability on the founder. This is going on in the world of mergers and acquisitions. So John walked out the door with a bag of 29 mil. So he's going to be the number one target. And that's even if it gets past the 2 years. I mean, if it's before the 2 years, they can just claw back the money in escrow. And it causes immediate challenges. So the biggest risk to the seller is an over-leveraged buyer. So what's the solution? I'll give a solution, but I just want to show the bankers grooming the books. So look here, right? Say the business has been around for 20 years, yeah? 20 odd years. The point I'm trying to make about the maintenance capital expenditure is it's so disguised because it's not linear. So in the last 3 years of the business, the maintenance capex has been zero. Imagine all the machines held together with duct tape. They're all rusting, they're breaking down, but they're just clinging on. They're clinging on for dear life. And the private equity firm buys the business and they have to pay all this money out. Extinction event happens 2 years after the purchase. That's what you've got to imagine. So how do we actually sort this out? Sell the business for what it's actually truly worth. You're better off sleeping at night and you can chill on the beach and not have any stress that they're going to claw back the money later on. Never lie on the quality of earnings report. Let's be honest here. If John knew the cost of the debt, he would know as himself, the poor business can't afford it. So you need to be careful. Absolutely only accept cash, full 100% cash on close. You know, the goal here is to understand the tricks the investment bankers are trying to play. They're estate agents. That's right, they can read a P&L statement. They want to sell the business for the maximum value and take no liability. This is why you don't go into these deals alone. You've got to understand this. But this is a massive issue going on in the private equity world and business founders who are selling the businesses. And it also applies to someone who is buying a business. If you're buying a business, you've also got to be equally looking at these tricks. That's why I made a video on the CROIC, the cash return on invested capital, is far more important than the P&L statement. That's another video I've made. But there you go. This is how you protect yourself from getting caught into the trap of investment bankers. So strictly, no vendor financing, cash on close, 100%. You'd rather take a deal of what the business is truly worth than trying to get too much, getting too greedy, trying to sell the business for too much. For 99% of founders, it's their first time selling a business. So you don't go into this, you don't walk in blind. Don't let these people take advantage, because it can come back and bite you.